you always make the most money, and the greatest financial opportunities are when other investors are afraid to invest. Now, Ukraine for investment funds. I can just tell you, I know from my work experience, there are a number of investment funds, turnaround funds, this and that are taking a long look at Ukraine. Some are actually investing. It looks dicey right now, but when it looks all positive and the economy is clicking along at 4 or 5% for 5 years, okay, everyone wants to invest. But you're going to make the most money when people don't see a country as a wise investment. I think Ukraine, after 2 years of economic downturn due to the war and the looting of the country by Yanukovych, we are seeing a turnaround. 1.1% growth this year, looking at 2% next year, 3% the year after that. Now, these are not big figures, but there are ground floor opportunities. Now, that being said, this is not the same as buying a McDonald's franchise in the States or Canada. I mean, there's certainly more risk. There's also much more reward potential. So if you come in and want to invest in Ukraine, the number one thing you need to do is get a good lawyer, good business lawyer. Number two, you need to have good support from your embassy and coordinate with them because they can run a lot of interference for you on trade issues, especially if you've been defrauded or about to get defrauded. So, but number one, have a good lawyer. Number two, have the support of your embassy. Number three, be sufficiently capitalized. You're not, the days of coming in and buying a business for $10,000 are over. You're going to have to invest more than that, but there are significant opportunities here, and so those who are willing to take the risk will get well rewarded. High-tech workforce, the well-educated workforce, is a big plus for Ukraine because you have a lot of tech-savvy employees that you can get at a fraction of what you'd have to pay them to hire them in the Silicon Valley out in California. The agricultural goods are second to none, great quality. All that is huge. Ukraine produces a lot of steel. Steel prices are down a little bit, but that's still an important factor. There's also some metallurgy out in the east, but it's near the war zone, which makes it a little more dicey. And another thing, too, that I think I just want to add that is going to be very important for Ukraine is to go forward economically with these privatizations. Now, the IMF has required Ukraine to raise $300 million this year through privatizations. So the Odesa portside facility is a key part of that, and that alone should bring in that $300 million figure. But on top of that, there are 5 Oblenergos, energy distributor companies located throughout the country where majority shares are being sold. And those are opportunities also for foreign investors. There's a ban on Russian investment in strategic enterprises such as electricity distributors. So it's a unique opportunity, and if the Western community, the Western investment community doesn't get involved, what's going to happen is those Oblenergos are going to go to the same old oligarchs who have minority shares now, and it's just going to be a redistribution of wealth amongst the oligarchs. So it's really important that Western investors get involved in those. And each of those Oblenergos are probably going to go in the anywhere from $10 to $30 million range. So that'll be something to keep a close eye on. Next year, Ukraine is required under the IMF agreement to raise $600 million, so twice as much next year through privatization. So it's very important for Ukraine to do their part to meet the IMF goals and to keep that IMF program going by privatizing these state-owned enterprises, which the state doesn't need to operate anymore. And the financial realities, confirm that. Well, let's say, for example, if someone had $1 million. I mean, really, and realistically, unless you just have a really good end and great political coverage, both from the embassy and domestic political coverage on the Ukrainian side, $100,000 is probably not going to go as far as you would need unless you're just really lucky. And there's people who obviously know more about this than I do, but from my experience, I would not want to. I think you would be looking at least $1 million to really have something significant and safe. Where to put the money? I would always put the money in something that's not interesting. whatever is considered the hot new thing or the sexy segment of the economy, stay away from it because everyone's going to be going after it. Number one, you're going to have a lot of competition. Number two, some of your competitors might be linked to oligarchs who write the rules about that industry, and all of a sudden you can find yourself out of business or lose your license or this and that. So you're at the will of other people in those, say, sexy sectors of the economy. My advice would be just to stay out of the razzle-dazzle sectors of the economy, and look for boring things like toilet paper and bricks and beets. I don't know. Find something boring, but that's profitable, and I'd put my money there. Continue with the privatization of state-owned enterprises. There's more than 3,000 state-owned enterprises. More than 80% of them lose money for the state. Get rid of them, even if it means, giving them away for $1, but just get rid of them, get them off the books. Those are parasites on the state budget, and usually they're tools of oligarchs to rob and defraud the state budget. So that would be number one. Number two, I think there needs to be certain, guarantees for foreign investors. Do they need special treatment? No, but you might provide some sort of, state guarantees for amounts invested, so that maybe a special state agency or ombudsman that the Prime Minister has talked about this to protect those foreign investors. I mean, let's face it, the reality is foreign investors have not had a lot of success in Ukraine over the years. Under Kuchma, there was the Kuchma-Gore Commission, which there were 100 American-owned businesses that really, just got shafted. And eventually they worked through the list. Most of the businesses finally got some sort of compensation or settlement. But, you don't want there to be any appearance of open season on foreign investors. In fact, you want the foreign investors to be respected, and even local bandits to be afraid to touch them. So hopefully that will be somehow enshrined in the law and or protections to the legal system, which will make sure that when someone puts money into something, assuming they've done their due diligence from a legal perspective, then that's a solid investment, and they have certain rights and privileges as they would in Europe and in North America. Under Yanukovych, I had a number of businesses that came in, Spanish company, American soybean farmers, just a number of just random disconnected groups. And of course, a lot of these things were paid, like trade association for the soybean farmers. They paid the trip. But so I had 5 or 6 big American farmers, 10,000 hectares of land kind of thing. And we studied the soybean industry here. And at the end of the day, it was almost inevitable during the Yanukovych years that I would say, you got to figure out what's best for you. But, if you don't invest, that's also, money well spent. I mean, you spent money to study whether or not to invest, and cutting your losses here is not a bad thing. And now there's opportunities. There's opportunities that were not under Yanukovych. The first thing I always did whenever groups like that, these trade groups or businesses would come in, first group, I would take them to a lawyer. And I would say, look, you got to understand what you're doing here because there's too many ways you can get screwed. So I'd always had the first meeting with business clients with a lawyer. Monday morning, 9 a.m., and then we'd do that. And then, probably the next meeting would write with the embassy. And then they would meet with the economics officer or the ag officer or whoever it was. Because in my opinion, you got to have those things locked down because otherwise you're just flying blind and you're very likely to lose your money.